today?
Good.
Glad here. My name is Andrew. That's Niall back there. We're the entire garrison of Fort Macinac today, so frankly, get used to seeing us. We'll be around for quite a while. Any questions anytime, please come talk to either of us. Now, the cannon that we're about to fire is a Model 1841 6-pound field gun. That sounds very technical, but it's actually very easy to explain. It's a field gun because it's on these huge wheels. This field carriage easily maneuvered around a battlefield. Very redundant. It's a Model 1841 because that was the year it was first designed and approved for service in the U.S. Army. Now, a lot of these were made in the 1860s for the Civil War, but if they were made to these specifications, they'd still be called Model 1841. So, even though ours is only a few years old as a replica, it is still technically a Model 1841 since it is made to those specifications. But the single most important part of the name is that this is a 6-pound cannon, designed to fire a cannonball that weighs 6 pounds. That's how cannons of this style were measured, essentially. Now, with 20 ounces of gunpowder, the full cannon charge, and also aided a little bit by the 150-foot elevation above the lake out there, we could fire that 6-pound ball a maximum range of about 1 mile. So the island out there, Round Island, is about a mile away. We could conceivably hit that island. However, this is a smoothbore gun. So at that maximum range, there's really no accuracy whatsoever. You could probably hit the island is about the best that you could say. Even at half a mile, the so-called accurate range for this cannon, so to the end of the break wall in the harbor out there, if you had a ship-sized target moving very slowly, perhaps even standing still, a very good cannon crew would expect to hit that about 1 in 3 shots. And that was considered not bad for the 1840s. That was on par with cannon technology available the world over, and they fire in battery. So at least 3 or 4 cannons firing all at once. And certainly on this very gun platform, we would have had 3 cannons, and at one point during the War of 1812. Now, older styles of cannon, but with roughly the same capabilities, there actually was an American ship that came into the harbor and tried to fire upon Fort Macinac. Now, that ship realized that within a couple of shots, it could not elevate its cannons high enough to hit even the wall of the fort. The British soldiers up here did not have the same problem. They easily fired down 150 feet, did a little bit of damage to the American ship, forced to retreat very quickly. Now, that brief engagement is the only time we know for sure in this fort's 115 years of active military occupation that live cannonballs were fired from this gun platform. About a week later, there was a more full-scale battle on the island, but that was on the north of the island, outside of the range of the cannons from the fort itself. The British actually took cannons with them to meet the American landing party. And now that battle on August 4th of 1814 was the last time this island saw combat of any kind. So, over many years at Fort Mackinac, they're not firing their cannons in anger or defense, they're firing them more for ceremony and salute. So especially by the time period that me and Niall addressed as, the 1880s, this 1840 style of cannon is very much out of date. They've advanced to more modern breech-loading artillery that can fire several miles accurately. But it's been so long since this island has really been under any threat of attack that the Army, when deciding what forts are getting these newer, more expensive pieces of artillery, are sending them to the forts that they feel like really might need them, and giving Fort Mackinac these kind of old cannons laying around warehouses just to make some noise and smoke them. Especially beginning in 1875, we actually become part of a national park, and really, national parks just don't get attacked. But this is still an important part of the life of soldiers here, firing these salutes. We fire at least 2 cannon salutes every single day. When we raise the flag in the morning, when we lower the flag in the evening, kind of starting and ending soldiers' work day. More cannon salutes on more occasions, like national holidays. For example, the 4th of July, we fire the national salute. So a cannon shot for every state in the Union, which by the 1880s was 38 cannon shots, but also for important visitors. And as a national park, we have plenty of those. Government officials, military officers, but also, well, tourists. And there's at least one recorded instance where the soldiers at Fort Mackinac fired a salute for the first steamship full of tourists that came by come the first thaw spring. So a kind of tradition that we'd love to continue today. We're going to fire a salute to welcome you folks here today. How's that sound?
Good.
Now, these salutes are honestly a pretty simple process because they're not actually firing a cannonball. Well, you do away with most of the whole hard part of cannons, which is actually aiming the things. I've got this leather patch back here to cover the touch hole up, making sure that no air is getting through the barrel, no sparks that might be in there are being stoked up while Niall cleans it out. That first cleaning tool he has, called an auger, designed to scrape out any debris that might be in there from our last shot, that can easily clog the cannon up, prevent us from loading the gunpowder down to the touch hole that I'm covering, which is where we have to access and ignite the powder from later on, but that debris could also still be on fire. So the second tool, the wet swab, that you just dunk into a bucket of water, designed to extinguish sparks. Because of the water in the sponge, obviously, but also by forcing out all the air. Heard that thunk when you pulled it out, that's the sound of air rushing back into the barrel, a vacuum collapsing. So with no air for at least that one brief moment, there was no oxygen, so nothing can burn. We feel doubly safe to load the gunpowder. This is a very, very small charge, only about 2.5 ounces. Compared to the 20 ounces you'd need to launch a cannonball, that's quite small, but still, plenty loud for you today. That ramrod, again, designed to force the gunpowder down to the touch hole that I'm covering. Well, we're now entirely loaded. This is where you would put a cannonball in if you were using one. But again, for those salutes, you would never use a cannonball for some obvious reasons. So Niall can start priming the cannon by taking a brass spike and poking it down the vent hole that I was just covering. He's ripping holes into the wrapping around the gunpowder, exposing it to our ignition device, which is one of these, called a friction primer. This is a small brass tube of gunpowder with a pin on the top. What do you do with the pin?
Pull it.
Pull it, exactly right. And underneath this black sealant is a friction-sensitive chemical called fulminate of mercury, something you'll find in a match head to this day. The pointing pin is like striking a match. It flares up, ignites the powder in the tube, and sends a jet of flame onto the main charge, setting off the cannon. So these were invented in the 1840s, around the same time as the style of cannon, used all throughout the American Civil War, and even here at Fort Mackinac up until the 1890s. Pretty much weatherproof and very reliable. Well, that's it. This is a good time to cover your ears, folks. It will just be a little bit loud. That said, there are 2 commands to fire this cannon. They are ready. Fire!
Woo!
And salute to welcome to the fort. I will. Thank you all so very much for joining us this morning. If you have any more questions left over, please let us know. Otherwise, at 10:30, we're going to fire the rifles off back down to the parade ground in the middle of the fort. Hope to see you there. Otherwise, while you're up here, I'd suggest actually the East Blockhouse exhibit over there. Talks more in depth about that battle in 1814 again. The only real battle on this island, so that's pretty interesting as well. But otherwise, folks, again, thanks so much for coming today. Have a great day.
Thank you.